question.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the popsicles today, Governor. That was a nice touch on my day.
Here to serve.
So the federal deficit, we're at 18 trillion.
Why don't you say who the group you are, because it's an interesting effort. I see you all over and welcome you, and everybody's always polite and well spoken.
So first budget is an organization. We ask presidential candidates about the debt because right now it's over $18 trillion, and people like myself, my generation, it's getting passed on to us. And so we don't think that's fair, so we're asking presidential candidates their thoughts on our federal debt and deficit, and what your first budget will be as when you're president of the United States.
So my first budget will be focused on, as I said, personal income growing faster than government income, which means that we're going to have to cut a lot of the growth in spending. We're talking about growth in spending. In the first budget world, the first question asked when you figure out the federal budget, this is the baseline for the federal budget. It's not this. Like your family budget, this would be baseline, right? If you had $1 one year, the next year you had $1, you spent $1 both years, that's flat. In Washington world, this is the baseline. It grows like 6%, depending on Medicare, Medicaid. That's the budget. So when you cut it to 4%, the world comes to an end. You're cutting, gosh, how could you cut the budget by 2% when it's growing by 4%? This is the Alice in Wonderland logic that hides the fact that our government is growing fast. And it also puts demands on higher taxes. Here's what I know to be true. Higher taxes is not the answer to dealing with the structural budget problems we face. We need to reform entitlements, challenge every aspect of how spending takes place, and part of that would have to be done in a transition period because the first budget is submitted literally the same time you're inaugurated, so you're going to have to give me a break if I'm here. I mean, it's going to take a little bit of time to do this. And then establish a high growth strategy that has bipartisan support. I'll conclude with this. If you take 2% more growth, assume that 1.5% is the new normal, the demands on government will overwhelm our structural budget deficits. And if you assume that we ever get back to whatever the historical interest rate world was, while we've been kind of struggling here, Washington has decided to double the debt in 7 years, narrow or lessen the maturities to now where 60% of debt comes due in 5 years, and have 0% interest rates. So debt service today is lower than it was 12 years ago. There's no urgency for the budget problems, which is why your group is really important. There's no urgency. It's like Alfred E. Newman, what may worry? No one really cares. Because in Washington, no one has challenged this assumption. The minute we get back to historical run rates, the debt service will overwhelm us, and the debt then becomes a huge problem. So we better start growing our economy and limiting government's spending overall, which requires consensus on how to reform Medicaid and Medicare, first of all, so that we provide services for those that desperately need it, but do it in a much more cost-effective way. That is just the first step, but that would be the first year's undertaking, I think, for any president if they were serious about trying to solve our problems. Listen, I appreciate you all.